And now, the craziest crime in California history takes our #1 spot. This case is so insane, so unbelievable, that it sounds impossible. For over 40 years, a monster terrorized California, committing at least 13 confirmed eliminations, over 50 assaults, and 120 burglaries. He was known by multiple names: the East Area Criminal, the Original Night Stalker, the Visalia Ransacker. But here is the absolute craziest part that makes this #1. The person responsible was a police officer. Joseph James D'Angelo worked as a cop in Northern California during the 1970s, the exact same time he was committing these horrific acts. Think about that. The man investigating crimes was the same man committing them. He would break into homes at night, tie up couples, and terrorize them for hours. Survivors described him as methodical and terrifying, often eating snacks from their kitchen mid-attack. He had an eerie habit of calling victims afterward to taunt them. D'Angelo's rampage suddenly stopped in 1986 and the case went cold, completely cold for decades. Investigators had DNA evidence but no match. The Golden State case became one of the most famous unsolved investigations in American history. Amateur sleuths, professional investigators, and even a writer named Michelle McNamara devoted their lives to finding this monster. McNamara sadly passed away before seeing justice, but her work helped keep the case alive. Now here is where this story goes from crazy to absolutely mind-blowing. In April 2018, investigators used a brand new technique called genetic genealogy. They took crime scene DNA and uploaded it to a public genealogy website that regular people use to find relatives. By building a family tree backwards, they identified D'Angelo as a distant match. Officers then followed him around his neighborhood in Citrus Heights and collected DNA from a tissue he threw in the trash. It matched. When officers arrested the 72-year-old former cop, he seemed shocked. For 40 years, he'd been living a normal life in the exact same area where he committed his first known attacks. He had a family. Neighbors described him as quiet but not suspicious. After his arrest, recorded conversations revealed D'Angelo muttering to himself, "I did all those things. I destroyed all those lives." The case became the very first major arrest using genetic genealogy, revolutionizing how cold cases are solved. D'Angelo pleaded guilty in 2020 to avoid the final penalty and heard 3 days of victim impact statements before being sentenced to life in prison without any chance of release. The Golden State case proves that monsters can hide anywhere, even behind a badge, and that justice can come even after 40 years of waiting. Image generations. At #2, we have a case that proves monsters do not always look like monsters. Dorothea Puente appeared to be a sweet grandmother figure running a boarding house in downtown Sacramento during the 1980s. She wore vintage clothing, large glasses, and styled her gray hair in a grandmotherly fashion. Social workers praised her for taking in society's most vulnerable, elderly and disabled people who had nowhere else to go. But beneath that kind exterior lurks something truly sinister. In November 1988, a social worker reported one of Puente's tenants missing. When police arrived to search the property, they noticed freshly disturbed soil in the backyard. What they unearthed was absolutely horrifying. 7 bodies buried in shallow graves. All of the victims had been residents of her boarding house. The truly crazy part? Each person had been carefully administered substances to end their lives. Then Puente calmly cashed their Social Security checks, month after month, as if nothing had happened. But wait, it gets crazier. Investigators discovered that Puente had hired a handyman to build a large wooden box, which she claimed was for storage. She paid him $800 and gave him a red pickup truck that belonged to her boyfriend, and that box ended up in a river with her boyfriend's body inside. Police found remains of 9 people total connected to Puente. One victim, a 78-year-old woman, was found buried without her head, hands, or feet. Another victim's watch was still ticking when they dug her up, and the dirt around her body suggested she may have been trying to claw her way out while still breathing. The wildest detail: when police first started investigating, they did not immediately suspect the sweet-looking grandmother. She actually convinced officers to let her go to a nearby cafe for coffee while they searched her property. She fled to Los Angeles, where she was finally arrested at a bar after striking up a conversation with an elderly man about government checks. He recognized her from the news and called police. Until her end in prison in 2011, Puente maintained that all her tenants passed from natural causes. The house on F Street where she committed these acts is now a tourist attraction where people can tour the infamous Death House for $15. Coming in at number 3 is a killer so obsessed with games and puzzles that he turned investigation into his own twisted entertainment. The Zodiac Killer terrorized Northern California in the late 1960s, confirmed to have taken at least 5 lives. But what makes this case absolutely crazy is not just the attacks. It is the elaborate cryptic messages he sent to newspapers and police. Starting in 1969, the Zodiac mailed letters to major newspapers containing complex coded messages. His first cipher had 408 symbols and included the chilling line when decoded. "I like taking lives because it is so much fun. More fun than hunting wild game because man is the most dangerous animal of all." The killer demanded these letters be printed on front pages, threatening more violence if newspapers did not comply. And you know what? They actually did it. 3 major newspapers gave their entire front pages to a criminal. But here is where it gets even crazier. The Zodiac sent 4 ciphers total. The second one, called Z340 with 340 characters, remained unsolved for 51 years. That is right, 5 decades. It was not cracked until December 2020, when 3 code breakers using advanced software finally decoded it. The message mocked authorities. "I hope you are having lots of fun trying to catch me." The killer signed every message with a creepy crosshair symbol and often included pieces of clothing from victims to prove his identity. He even called into a live television show claiming he would reveal himself, but never showed up. The Zodiac claimed to have taken 37 lives total, though only 5 are confirmed. To this day, despite DNA evidence and thousands of suspects investigated, nobody has ever been officially identified as the Zodiac Killer. The case remains one of the greatest unsolved mysteries in American criminal history, a testament to how one person with a twisted love of puzzles kept an entire state in fear. At number 4, we have a case so bizarre it sounds like a horror movie plot. Meet Marcus Wesson, known as the Vampire King of Fresno. In March 2004, police responded to what they thought was a routine custody dispute at a small house in Fresno. 2 mothers were demanding their children back from a massive man with gray dreadlocks that trailed down to his knees. This man calmly spoke with officers, then walked back into his house and locked the door behind him. What happened next shocked even veteran officers. Multiple shots rang out from inside the home. When police finally entered, they discovered 9 bodies stacked in a pile in a back bedroom. 7 of the victims were children under 9 years old. Each person had been shot through the right eye. But here is the truly crazy part. The room was filled with antique caskets that Wesson had purchased months earlier from a local shop. Wesson had created his own twisted vampire cult with his own family members. He taught his children that he was a reincarnation of a higher being and that they needed to prepare for an apocalypse. He even wrote his own version of religious texts claiming that drinking essence was the key to eternal life. Neighbors reported seeing Wesson buying a dozen mahogany coffins, which he claimed were for repairing a boat. The man had such complete control over his family that when authorities tried to take the children away, the tragedy unfolded. Perhaps the most disturbing detail? Wesson walked out of that house covered in the aftermath, completely calm, and simply surrendered to police. The crime scene was so horrific that the police chief, who had 40 years of experience, called it the most traumatic case in Fresno history. Wesson remains on California's road to this day, forever known as the Vampire King, who turned his family into his own twisted cult. Welcome back to the channel where we dive deep into the craziest crimes that shocked California. Today, we are counting down the 5 most insane cases that left investigators speechless. Buckle up because these stories are absolutely wild, and trust me, you will want to stick around until number 1. It gets absolutely unbelievable. Our 5th craziest crime takes us back to 1978, when a handsome photographer named Rodney Alcala appeared as Bachelor Number 1 on the hit TV show The Dating Game. Picture this, a man in a brown bell-bottom suit charming a bachelorette on national television while millions watched from home. The show's host introduced him as a successful photographer who enjoyed skydiving and motorcycling. Sounds like the perfect catch, right? Wrong. Dead wrong. Here is where it gets absolutely insane. At the time of his television appearance, Alcala had already ended the lives of at least 5 women. He was literally in the middle of his rampage when he decided to go on a dating show. Even more bizarre, fellow contestants described him as having strange opinions and weird vibes during filming. The Bachelorette, Cheryl Bradshaw, actually won him as her date. But get this, she refused to go out with him afterward because she found him creepy. Her gut instinct probably saved her life. But the crazy does not stop there. Alcala used his photography skills as his hunting method. He would approach women offering to take their pictures, then use that opportunity to commit his horrific acts. When police finally caught him in 1979, they found a storage locker containing hundreds of photographs of unidentified women and girls. To this day, authorities believe many of those people in the photos could be additional victims. The dating game episode became one of the most chilling pieces of television history, proof that monsters can hide in plain sight and even charm their way onto your TV screen.